As you might already know, I am quite a bit of a Zelda fan. At this point, I've basically played every single 3 entries thus far. I haven't played Breath of the Wild 2 only because that hasn't released yet in terms of this video, but I do plan to play it whenever it does come out. And I, again, do really enjoy a lot of the games that I've played, even the 2D ones. I haven't really played a lot of those ones, but from the games I have played and for the amount of time I spent on them, I did enjoy it for the most part. And this video was kind of just me rambling on about some things I always look forward to and some things I end up enjoying the most of every single Zelda game. Of course, this is just going to be what I think and what I look forward to, so if you want to let me know in the comments down below, you can. And now I think it's a good time to get into the video. One of the things I end up looking forward to the most definitely has to be the dungeons, just because I find them to be the most integral part to any Zelda game, just because of the fact that you kind of need to do them in order to progress the story. I'm not too familiar with most of the 2D Zelda games with their dungeons, but I can definitely say with the 3D games, a lot of them do have pretty solid ones. And frankly, I think that they also do have really cool puzzles, even in the 2D games, what I've noticed. But again, I purely base what Zelda games I like for the most part off these things. They also do end up mixing up the dungeon items throughout the game. Like, say for example, you can end up using something like the bow even in the loud dungeons, which I honestly really like, just because it makes you think about like, oh well, I have this item, let's maybe try using this one in this scenario and stuff like that. The only games I felt that had a lackluster series of dungeons had to be Wind Waker and Breath of the Wild, and in most cases, or at least the first half of Ocarina of Time. For something like Wind Waker, which I've also kind of explained in my likes and dislikes, if you want to watch that, I'll link in the description, I just found them mostly easy. Breath of the Wild, on the other hand, it's more or less the same reason as Wind Waker, on top of just finding dungeons visually boring because they use the same aesthetics from the shrines, and by that point I just got bored. And I'm not saying these dungeons are the worst, I still found them kind of fun, and especially with Wind Waker, where I found like the ladder dungeons to be kind of challenging, and Breath of the Wild, I just, there was some challenge, just not exactly what I was expecting, considering that Skyward Sword and Majora's Mask have fantastic dungeons. It's just that these ones are not exactly what I was looking for. And I might as well just mention Ocarina of Time, and as I said, that for the most part I found that some of the dungeons were also kind of lacking, but I feel that only really extended to the first 3 and maybe like one in the second half. For the first 3 dungeons, I found that like for the most part you just go in a circle and then just do one minor thing and then just go in a straight line. I feel the only one that kind of diverged from that was the Great Jabu Jabu, because I think you end up having to go to 3 separate spots to like get rid of like the jelly thing. I never knew what that was. And I guess maybe for the other 2 you had to like eventually go at a certain height. Like for the Great Deku Tree, you have to jump down, but then eventually just go in a circle. And for the Great Dongo, same thing. All you really had to do that was kind of hard was get the bomb in the eye of the skull thing, and that's really it. But again, I never really found those ones to be challenging. And for the second half, I found the Shadow Temple to be pretty easy, just because it never made you like consider all the rooms. It mostly just went in a straight line. You might have had to diverge like left or right, and that's really it. And there's not really much challenge out either. Now let's move on to the next point, and that has to be the story. And I know that probably sounds a little bit shocking. And I know these ones aren't really the most in-depth stories, I just found them super entertaining. And I always like seeing how they twist a legend in every game, along with maybe seeing like new plot points they bring up. For example, I really like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword for that fact, just because I found these ones to have the most interesting stories in the 3D Zelda games. And again, 2D games are a little bit different since I haven't really played a lot of them, but I hear that they're still pretty good. For Twilight Princess, I found the Twilight people to be really interesting, and I really liked their conflict with Hyrule. And then there was the whole creation story with Skyward Sword that I love, along with this version of Link and Zelda being some of my favorite incarnations in the series. Then we have the actual characters, which I find the majority of them to be really likable, or they actually do get some nice developments. Either or I'm fine with. I feel sometimes they overlap, but of course that's not always. And of course, some characters that I end up liking have to be Goose, Twilight Princess Zelda, Skyward Sword Zelda, Midna, and Tetra to name a few. Of course, not all of these characters get developed as much, but at the very least, I think they're very likable, which is another reason why I kind of go back to these games just to see these characters interact with, the main characters and stuff like that. It's just really nice to see them. Then there's also the world itself and just exploring it. This one obviously is a little bit low on the list for me just because exploration is something I don't really pay much attention to regardless of the game I'm playing. I just find it nice to have some secrets in the world here and there, and whenever I do end up exploring, I just have a fun time with it. Some of the games in the Zelda series that I find have really good worlds to explore have to be Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, and Link to the Past from what I played of it. Obviously, a lot of the games do end up using their dungeon items outside of whatever dungeon you get them in. For example, Twilight Princess, you can actually use the Gear Boomerang and the Spinner to get some items, and say something like Wind Waker is very similar where you can use the Giant Hammer, the Iron Boots, and the Hookshot to get various items. Obviously, there's more examples of this, but I think you get my point. And then there's Breath of the Wild, which has the whole thing of being able to climb and explore everything, which is again really nice just because you can find a hidden weapon in just some deserted area, which is always really cool. The next point is also really small in comparison, but I always do look forward to the bosses. They always end up being really fun to me and really rewarding to take down, despite the fact that they're not the most complex bosses out there. They almost always end up using the item you get in the dungeon, but I don't really mind that because, they do have interesting powers to them in the first place, and again, I just find them fun. I also really liked a lot of the bosses from the adult part of Ocarina of Time, like Phantom Ganondorf and the Twin Witches from the Spirit Temples, along with basically every boss from Majora's Mask. Of course, I think the other three titles have some pretty nice bosses, but the examples I gave really do capture on why I really like bosses from the Zelda games. And again, the 2D games, I guess are alright from what I played. And that's pretty much what I look forward to in every new and old Zelda game that I end up playing. Some other things that I kind of look forward to, but again are extremely minor in comparison to the other points, is what dungeon items you get and if the game has some really good side quests. The dungeon items one is fairly common throughout all the games. Like almost every game is going to have a boomerang, almost every game is going to have something like a hookshot and stuff like that. I know not every case, but again, it's pretty common. And the side quest one is kind of just a whatever thing because some games have more, some games have less. I know Breath of the Wild has that one a whole lot more, but again, these stuff I don't really care for as much as the others. But I want to know what you guys look forward to in every single Zelda game that you play. Let me know in the comments below, and thank you all for watching.